Hello and welcome to a conversation with Brian Kerby. This video is part of my interview series with science communicators and skeptical activists done for my Skeptical Inquirer online column. Brian is a versatile musician and private lesson teacher, and he holds a Bachelor of Music in Jazz and Contemporary Music, a master's degree in music performance, and a Master of Education in Science and the Public. Brian's been performing and teaching music for 24 plus years, and he started writing and producing independent videos in 2005. He's received 7, or is it 8, we'll have to talk about that, Emmy Award nominations from 2016 through 2020 in audio production for his work on 502 Sessions, including a 2018 nomination for production of George Rob's 502 Sessions performance of the Misconception song. I love that song. The reason I'm interviewing him now is this little bit. Brian is the producer and host of the show 502 Conversations, which features in-depth discussions with scientists, magicians, skeptics, philosophers, educators, medical doctors, and a slew of others. These episodes concern science, the nature of science, belief, why and how we believe, pseudoscience, medical quackery, and even more. Welcome to my own little show, Brian.
Oh, thank you so much. Your little show might be bigger than mine.
It's nice to see that you're in your official studio here. I've never had anyone in such a great set when I was interviewing them.
I'm going to zoom in though. I mean, this is a bit far away, so you got the full idea here.
That's a great idea. Let's do that.
All right, give me 1 second.
Yep.
Okay, I'm back, better than ever. So we left off comparing the size of each other's shows, which is what men do when they get together. Is that right?
I wanted to interview you because I love your show, 502 Conversations, and I want to promote it to folks who follow the Skeptical Inquirer, but somehow haven't discovered your show.
Oh, thank you so much. I do have a small but pleasant audience.
So full disclosure for everyone watching, you interviewed me on your show twice, I think.
That's correct.
Once was discussing psychics. It was after I did a talk at PsyCon on that subject, the harm in believing in psychics. And then the second time, you were nice enough to help me promote my organization I volunteer for, Recovering from Religion. But now the tables are turned. I get to ask you all the tough questions.
Yes, and I was surprised, I guess, when you reached out. And I should say right off the bat here that so the show that I run, I'm very fortunate to work at a community access TV station. But anything I say here today is my own opinion. It does not reflect the station, its board of directors, or anything like that. I always have to put that disclaimer up, so I might as well say it here as well.
So tell me a little bit about, is that your decision to do that? Is that something that's typically done? I don't see that on other YouTube videos.
Well, so my show is primarily a broadcast show. YouTube is, believe it or not, secondary. And because it's broadcast in the community and it's also syndicated and it gets picked up by stations across the US, that's just the standard disclaimer we use. I also co-host a show with a preventive medicine doctor. And I think we have the same disclaimer on that show, but I'm not sure.
No, that's
it should be on there if not.
Okay, so we'll talk more about the show in a bit. First, I want to get a little bit personal with you. Just want to find out a little bit of your background and why you're interested in this kind of stuff. So were you always a skeptic?
No.
And what got you into skepticism? What changed your mind?
Do you like that answer? See, so that's like the legal answer. You don't give any more information. You asked a question, the answer was no.
And I was ready with the follow-up.
Okay. And could you please restate the question?
So what got you into skepticism? What turned you into someone interested in this field, in science communication and skepticism in general?
Well, so I guess I should give a little bit of background information.
Sure.
As you mentioned, I am a musician and I went through music school. Combined with that, I also performed, but I've worked in the pit for a lot of musicals, things like that, as well as freelancing. And you probably wouldn't be surprised, but the arts are fertile ground for pseudoscience.
No, I'm not surprised at all.
All kinds of superstitions and things you can do to improve your performance. I think my time was before those balance bracelets, but I wouldn't be surprised if, people wore those. And it's not that musicians are particularly susceptible. Something I like to say in my show anyway, is that we're all susceptible depending on the circumstances. So, if you're a musician and you're surrounded by other musicians and you need that edge, why not put on the balance bracelet? You're susceptible. You want to do your best. So you're going to buy into certain things, maybe, if you haven't.
It's like playing any, professional sports or even not professional sports. Everyone's superstitious about wearing certain types of clothing or whatever. And well, it's not going to hurt if I wear my lucky socks. So yeah.
And I also want to clarify that when I say we're all susceptible, I mean we are all susceptible. I think the statistics are like 1 in 5 graduate students believes in some conspiracy theory. So level of education helps a little bit, but not completely. Smart people, as you know from the Nobel Prize disease, right? Smart people believe weird things, and they are good at convincing themselves why they couldn't be wrong, right? The smarter you are, the easier it is to rationalize.
So the most famous case of that for people who don't know what you're talking about is Linus Pauling, I guess, who went, nuts on vitamin C and caused the craze that vitamin C cures pretty much everything, and there's no evidence for that.
Right. That's a very good example. There are others, but as you say,
Yep.
that's the most prominent one, at least in our circles. So anyway, how I became more skeptical was, believe it or not, pre-YouTube. I don't know if anybody remembers Book TV on C-SPAN 2. And you don't remember that? So Book
No, I
TV
don't.
on the weekends on C-SPAN 2, they would have authors in to read. Not read, sorry. They'd have authors in, they'd do interviews, much like what I do. And I would watch this while I was on the treadmill week after week after week. And there was a light bulb moment that went off in my head when I just realized I'd been wrong about a lot of stuff. And once that light bulb goes off, it's something it's like you can't unhear something. It's difficult to unlearn something. And so when that light bulb goes off, you can't ignore it. So it was just exposure to, people that were a lot smarter than I am. Well, let me clarify that, like I said, this was a process, but at some point I fell over the edge. All right. So it was a long process of arguing with myself, arguing with these interviews that I saw. And then there was just one moment where something happened and I said, this guy's making some great points based on, he's looked at the evidence, and his opponent here really isn't making any decisions based on evidence. And that's not right. And then
But
that's when I realized, oh, okay, so that's not reasonable.
so did
And
this concern pseudoscience, paranormal kind of topics, or religion, or
it
both?
ended up being religion was the tipping point, but I think there were others, but religion specifically was the tipping point. And I should say that for those of you that think there's no point in debating a creationist or a pseudoscientist, that may be true in the grand scheme, but don't discount the people that are listening but aren't saying anything. And because that's what happened to me. So don't discount having a polite conversation, no matter the position of your opponent. I guess that's a fair word. And what tactics they use. Kill them with kindness, reason, and information. Not to say that the information deficit model works on everybody. It doesn't. That's when you combine it with dialogical, the polite conversation, plus some information deficit, filling in some gaps. I think for me, it was, again, religion was the main tipping point. And the author I was listening to said something like, imagine if I told you that I thought there was a diamond buried in my backyard, diamond as big as a house. And every Sunday we dug for it. And it gave my family great meaning. We all got together every Sunday, and, it was a good time. We never did find the diamond, but the belief that it was there was just so foundational to who we are. But that doesn't make it true, right? And for some reason, then everything just hit me all at once in that conversation, or that conversation I was listening to. And then also then you dig into it a little bit deeper and you find out how wrong you are, right? So every civilization has a flood myth. That's something you don't really learn in Sunday school. That's
Right,
my
right,
story,
right.
right? I thought that was unique to my upbringing and my religion, but no, it's not. It's a common myth.
So, what's the most personally perplexing conspiratorial belief or paranormal or supernatural belief that people around you maintain
Uh,
that you just don't understand how they can still believe this?
Well, I don't know, because aside from my friends that maybe still compartmentalize and have some religious belief, I guess that would be, and I'm not going to fault them for that. And because I understand it. So you're asking something that I don't understand. And I guess I'd have to think about it, because it would be hard for me to figure that question out. I'd have to think about it for quite a while because I can't think of any of my friends that it's like I don't know anybody that smokes anymore, right? But when I was in college, a lot of people smoked. I don't know anybody that smokes anymore. So it's hard for me to determine who believes what, if that makes any sense.
Okay, so let's divorce it from your personal acquaintances. Just you know, YouTube algorithm suggests, hey, watch this video, and it's about somebody promoting something, or TikTok.
Oh
Like,
well, the biggest thing that I can't get over is that the 2020 election was stolen.
oh,
I don't see how anybody can believe that now because it just doesn't make any sense. There's no, in fact, even when it's one of the easiest, like kind of like homeopathy to me because there's no evidence. It's just a lot of people are saying and a lot of theories, but no evidence has ever been produced. And people that wanted the election to be stolen have even admitted, you know what, we didn't find anything. Prominent people, that's what I'm saying, not just the conspiracy theory crowd, but prominent people have come out. And I mean, they have opened up a hornet's nest on themselves because now they can't get back out of it. They can't bring their tribe back, so to speak. So that's one of the things that I find pretty perplexing.
Hmm. Okay, so before we get into the show, your show, talking about your show, we'll see one more question on this. What are your own favorite skeptical or SciComm, topics, podcasts, YouTube channels, or anything like
Oh,
that?
so I guess like, well, I do like the Center for Inquiry's channel, the YouTube channel where you can watch their Thursday night series. I listen to The Body of Evidence with Christopher Labos and Jonathan Jerry. I never miss one of those. I tend to listen to The Skeptic's Guide to the Universe. I haven't heard all of them.
All right, so 502 conversations. So for the viewers, I want to tell them that I found the following information about it when I just looked at YouTube channel
Really?
yesterday.
Oh,
53 full episodes, 5 shorts. The shorts are less than 10 minutes long. That seems to be a new thing. Is that right? The
that's a
shorts?
new thing. I was
Yeah.
trying to work my trying to appeal to the clickbait crowd without creating clickbait.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I watched a couple. They were really good. So the full-length interviews are organized into 5 playlists. The big one by far is scientists, 21 different videos. Critical thinking, a favorite topic of mine. And the single most interviewed person seems to be a separate playlist, Dr. Paul Offit, with 8 different interviews. And I can understand why in the age of the pandemic, right? Philosophy and psychology is another one. And then, interestingly, magicians. So I find all of those interesting. I've seen not all of them, I'll admit, but I saw all the Dr. Paul Offit ones. I interviewed him myself too. Those are fascinating. So which of those types are your favorite to do?
Well, they kind of are all they overlap. So I kind of made up those playlists, but almost every one of them could fit into each other, maybe except for magicians, but they could
Yeah,
still go into
magicians and
science.
science. Yeah,
And Dr. Offit could be Dr. Offit. He could be also scientist. He could
critical
be,
thinking. True.
yeah,
Yeah.
right. So I have to, I don't know how I came up with those and because they aren't pigeonholed. So you'll see multiple videos on multiple playlists is how that goes. And I should say Dr. Offit has been great, very generous with his time during the pandemic. I'm super thankful to him for taking so much time to speak with me as we went through. And coming from a community access station, this is how information gets out to a lot of older people as well, because they do watch these shows. And I don't have a large YouTube audience, which is fine with me because I've only been called a Nazi once and I don't have to argue back and forth too much with people. So, that's fine with me, but don't discount the community aspect of community access.
Yeah. So
Even
let's
though
talk
even
about.
though Wayne's World gave us all a bad name.
So yeah. So let's talk more about this. I mean, except for the disclaimer, and I said, well, why is there a disclaimer there? And then you mentioned once to me that, oh, it's also broadcast somehow. So what is that about? Like what is the distribution besides the YouTube channel?
Well, so our station has 18,000 subscribers. So you may think, oh, wow, that's great. Well, community access stations, I think it was in the mid 80s. It's part of your cable bill. If you get cable like Comcast, we don't do any ads, but for, those cable providers, a certain portion of that is collected. And then it supposedly is supposed to go back to the town to create an access station. Don't take my word. Don't take me on this as verbatim. Every community is different, but the basic understanding is, and then that allows them to have a station and a community station, such as what I do. There's an education aspect to it for school events, and also public meetings, such as your local select board, your planning board, library board of trustees, and that kind of thing. And I know people can think that those meetings are long and boring, which they can be. But if you really want to understand how things work in your community, wade through some of those meetings because they are interesting.
So the 502, and as I read in your introduction, you won awards for the 502 sessions, including George Robb's The Miskin. What is this with the 502? What is that about?
It's the street address, that's all. So
Oh,
I wanted to name it Studio 502, right? But some genius had registered every studio with a number after it
oh,
for a domain name. So Studio 501, Studio 502, Studio 1, Studio 2, Studio 3. So I don't know. So I just changed it to 502 sessions. And then when I started doing the conversation show, I just went with 502 conversations.
that makes sense now. So how did you get involved with the broadcasting in this? Because you had a music background. What does this have to do with broadcasting or, television work?
Well, uh, I produced some sailing videos for family and friends earlier in my years. And then I produced some short story videos with a music student of mine, but I wanted to learn more about editing and multicam shoots. So that's another benefit of your community access station is they usually have facilities. And if you go to them, it's much like a library. They'll teach you how to edit. They probably run a class in how to use the equipment. And so that's what I did.
I get it. Okay.
And then you have access to all this great editing software.
Yeah, yeah. It puts the stuff I have here on my desktop to shame. That is for sure. So, who makes the decisions regarding the 502 Conversation show's content? Is that just you? Does anybody in management need to okay something?
So I'm very fortunate. This is my show. I can produce, I can interview who I want. Nothing I've done. I don't generally get permission. I can't imagine why I would need to. I have other duties here at the station. I am the production manager and I program the education channel. But 502 Conversations is something that I'm very fortunate to be able to do on my own.
Oh, that's fantastic. So,
Now, I suppose there is a line I could cross. I'm not sure what it would be. I'm sure I'll probably find out. Knowing me, that's what happens. If there's a line to be crossed, I'll find it.
so you certainly do a lot of preparation prior to your interview based upon, the questions I see you asking each of your guests. Can you tell me if any of the episodes went down a different path than you expected because of the answers you got some of the questions and maybe you redirected the interview?
Well, they all go down a different path than I expect because I read the book or the books or the papers or whatever it is we're going to talk about. And then I compile, I don't know, 20 questions, 40 questions, 60 questions, who knows? But I always find that after I ask the first question, the conversation starts to flow and it's kind of not much I can do about it. So, not that I try to, if it takes a natural flow. So, I will try to redirect if there's a couple of questions I really want to get out there. But a lot of times I get to the end and I haven't asked, a fraction of what I had prepared.
Do you target each interview for a certain length of time?
I do, but it's difficult. You don't want to have an artificial time. Well, that's where we're fortunate with YouTube. There's two problems with that. One is people just aren't interested in watching well, not that many people are interested in watching long form conversations, but that's like watching the meeting, the planning board meeting. It may be 3 hours, but if you really want to understand what's going on, that's the conversation you have to have. So I usually cut them off at about an hour, and that's because for broadcast reasons. Some of the YouTube episodes are longer because then I don't have to cut them down. If it's gone particularly long, but I think I want to keep it, I'll separate it into 2 parts for broadcast, but still one show for YouTube. So I try to keep them, the short answer is I try to keep them to an hour, but it's very, very difficult. It's a lot easier, like if Paul Offit comes on and says, I got 40 minutes. And then
Right,
I can, whoa,
right,
poo, 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 poo. Then I
right,
can
right,
pare
right.
things down.
So a couple of topics I did not see in your 502 conversations. I'm wondering if you plan on doing it, you weren't that interested, or whatever. Maybe I missed it. The subject of UFOs, which this last couple of years has been a big to-do.
Uh, I don't know. It might come up. I've been disappointed in some of the skeptic interviews I've heard that seem, first of all, let's be upfront. This big UFO thing that's come up is just somebody heard it from somebody else that heard it from somebody else. No evidence, right? So these interviews in Congress, somebody is saying that, oh, this guy saw something and he asked somebody what it was and somebody told him what it was. And now I'm telling you. That is not evidence. So it would be hard for me to, I don't know who I would talk to about it, except for how is this getting so much publicity? So I'm coming at it from the evidence standpoint of that testimony and the lack of investigative journalism. I mean, I won't question any, well, I would question them about it, but I'm, somebody that's had an experience that they think is real or something they can't explain. Yeah, I understand that part of it. Okay. That doesn't count as evidence, but I'm very specifically talking about whatever this bombshell was supposed to be that's not. Does that make sense?
Yep, yep. And all right, so the another topic that you probably did, I think I watched it when it first came out. Now it's been so long, and I've seen a lot of content on the subject. I don't remember. You did talk to Robert Bartholomew, Dr.
Yes.
Bartholomew, about, and I assume you talked about Havana syndrome.
For well over an hour. That was the only thing we talked about.
Yeah. And what was the timing of that, before or after this recent month ago, I want to say 60-minute report, which opened the barn doors again?
I think this was after the first 60 Minutes report.
Okay.
And again, I don't question these people's experiences. I question the origin of them, which I guess is a no-no. But again, there's a lack of the lack of investigative journalism on that topic is astounding. It is astounding that 60, and the guy, Scott, what's his name? Scott Pelley, he's like, oh, so serious. I mean, total acting, in my humble opinion. And they have the resources. It's just bizarre to me that they don't investigate it further. There are people suffering that need help. And for me, you want to get to the bottom of that so you can help people. It's not unlike the lost time of going to a homeopath, right? People are suffering, they need help. So try to get them the help they need, as opposed to not doing that, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I remember Dr. Bartholomew actually telling people that it's a nefarious weapon, actually, instead of what it is, actually hinders their treatment and getting better. So, yeah, that's horrible. So, since I met you at SciCon, that's where we first met, I want to talk to you about that conference.
I don't recall that meeting.
So I recall, and memory is frail, so maybe I'm wrong, but my memory says you came up to me after my SciCon talk about the belief in psychics in 2019 and said you'd like to interview me for your show, and I didn't know who you were.
That's fine.
And that eventually that did happen. The pandemic happened, and then it was like a little bit later, but we did it on Zoom. And that was cool. So that was the time I talked about the harm that faces people when they put their trust in psychics on your show.
Yeah, similar to Havana syndrome, right? People are suffering and they're being taken advantage of.
So have you interviewed people directly while at SciCon or maybe other conferences you've been to? Do you
yeah. For the first 2 or 3 years I did that.
Okay.
So I think I did 2016, 2017, 2018, 2019. I traveled with a full studio setup, 3 cameras, lighting, audio, a photog. Now, but again, of course, people could just shoot on their iPhones and stuff now. So someone might say, well, why don't we just shoot in this corner or that thing? But I like, I'd rather have a little bit more control over the
You're very professional. I've interviewed people for The only people I interviewed live myself at the conference was for the Skeptic Zone, and it was only audio because it's an audio podcast.
Yes.
But I would just get them in the hallway. If I was lucky, I would find one of those rooms that wasn't quite being used because it was a break in there, and I'd go in there. But yeah, there's always some background noise. But actually, on that show, that's kind of acceptable because you're
Yeah.
interviewing people at a conference, and you expect that, to be in the background, so it's not bad.
No, I don't think there's anything wrong with taking a single camera into like the convention hall with a microphone and grabbing people as they walk by either.
Yeah.
Right. And doing a video that way. It's just not what I've done. In fact, I think that's got great appeal. Hey, here comes
Right.
Neil. Hey, you got a couple of minutes.
I looked just yesterday at the speaker list for this conference. They don't have the full list up yet. I don't know what.
I know I need the full list so I can start
I
making phone calls.
know, and I want to see who I'm going to interview. But they do have Neil deGrasse Tyson coming back, which is
I saw that.
interesting. And for the first time, Brian Cox. I am so looking forward.
yeah.
I hope I can interview him.
Well, I guess I'll stop because you're doing it for me.
No. Can never have enough of this. Okay, so with that, let's call it a wrap. Is there anything else you want to say before we sign off?
So I think that something that I do in my conversations, which I hope is beneficial. I don't do this all the time, but it's not infrequent, is that I like to have people define terms as they go. So when I had Naomi Oreskes on, I don't know if you saw that. The first question I said, well, what is science? Right. Let's make sure we're talking about the same thing. And I will do that, define tribalism, define critical thinking, because you want to make sure that you're having the same conversation. And a lot of times you may not be and not realize it. That's why these conversations can take a long time. You want to understand what, I keep saying the word opponent, but that's not, your interlocutor is saying. You want to understand the conversation you're having, whether you agree or disagree. And especially if you disagree, you want that person to define their terms, because maybe you're not disagreeing. Maybe you are. Maybe you're disagreeing more than you think, but you really want to understand what they're saying.
That's always a good strategy, no matter what the topic is. Yes, I love that. All right. Well, thank you again, Brian. I'm looking forward to seeing you again in Vegas in just a few months, October. Yes.
Well, I hope to be there. So I look forward to seeing you as well.
Thank
And
you.
all the rest of you.
Thank you, Brian.
You're welcome.